2,000 years ago, the bustling fishing village of Capernaum sat on the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee. Today, these ancient basalt ruins mark the physical foundation of a settlement once packed with travelers, merchants, and the daily grind of first-century life. It was here that Jesus established the headquarters of his early ministry. Somewhere in this crowded town lay a man who had lost his ability to walk. He was sick of the palsy, paralyzed and confined to a small mat on the floor. Lying there day after day, he faced the isolation of a body that no longer responded to his will, a condition that left him dependent on the charity of others for his most basic needs. In that state, passive wishing accomplishes little. He could hope for a miracle, but the reality was that he could not move toward the one person in Capernaum capable of providing it. Fortunately, he had 4 friends who recognized that belief cannot remain a quiet internal sentiment. For their friend to stand again, their conviction had to become a kinetic force. They understood that when someone is immobilized by their own circumstances, friendship requires stepping in to act as the physical vehicle for a restoration they cannot reach on their own. With Jesus rumored to be teaching at Peter's house, the 4 men each took a corner of the mat and hoisted their friend into the air. They navigated the narrow dirt streets of Capernaum, acting as a human stretcher under the hot Mediterranean sun. But when they finally arrived, they hit a massive roadblock. A dense, shoulder-to-shoulder crowd had already jammed into the courtyard, blocking every possible entry point to the house. A bystander flatly told them it was useless. There was no room left inside. By most logic, this was the moment to set the mat down, admit defeat, and go home. Conventional belief treats a closed door as the end of the journey. Bold faith interprets a physical barrier as a prompt to find a different way in. Instead of turning around, the group pivoted. They pushed their way to the edge of the house and hauled the heavy mat up the steep exterior stairs, taking the problem to the roof. To understand what they did next, look at the architecture of a first-century Palestinian roof. It was a dense construction, a foundation of crisscrossed wooden laths, covered by a thick layer of brushwood, and sealed with a coat of hard, sun-baked clay. The men dropped to their knees and began ripping into the ceiling. It required intense physical labor, tearing away chunks of hardened clay and snapping the rough brushwood by hand until they had carved a gaping hole over the room below. Using ropes tied to the corners of the mat, they lowered the stretcher through the opening. The paralyzed man descended from the ceiling until he came to a rest squarely at the feet of Jesus. Throughout this process, the 4 friends didn't say a word. They didn't need to. Their disruption of the teaching session served as their ultimate plea for help. Faith that creates change is inherently disruptive. It is willing to dismantle social norms and physical structures to gain access to grace. Looking up at the destroyed ceiling and the 4 faces peering down, Jesus wasn't angry about the property damage. He was delighted by their persistence and their refusal to be stopped by a crowd. The historical text notes that Jesus saw their faith, the collective, undeniable action of the 4 friends, and responded to that. Before addressing the man's crippled legs, Jesus addressed the man's heart. He declared his sins forgiven, prioritizing the man's spiritual barrier over his physical condition. This pardon triggered a silent uproar among the religious authorities in the room. They silently accused Jesus of blasphemy, believing he claimed authority belonging strictly to God. Jesus met their silent accusations with a countermaneuver. Anyone can say, "Your sins are forgiven," because the result is invisible. To prove he possessed that hidden authority, he chose to perform a harder task with a visible result. He turned back to the paralyzed man and commanded him to get up, take his mat, and go home. The man stood on his own 2 feet, rolled up his bedding, and marched out through the very crowd that had blocked him earlier. Persistent, active friendship can lead to a turning point. By choosing to carry the weight of others through their darkest moments, our actions can become the vessel that carries them to total restoration. 2000